Hello, parents, guardians, and family members. Welcome. This is Mr. Nose speaking. So in this particular video podcast, what I want to do is going to give you some overview around Google Classroom. This video podcast is mainly directed towards the Physics 11, the non-IB students, because the Physics 12 IB students that I have, everything that was done last year is the exact same as this year. So again, this is mainly as an intro to the Physics 11 parents. And so one of the things I do want to make mentions is that the Google Classroom is an incredibly powerful resource for students to use. But unfortunately, parents don't have direct access to what you're seeing here. And so the best way for you to make sure that you have access to this is to ask your child for their username and password to enter into Google Classroom. That's a security measure to ensure that authorized users are embedded in the classroom. So that's something that you're going to want to discuss with your child. I don't have access to their personal accounts. Why is Google Classroom so important is because in addition to my course website, so again, let me mention here on my course website, parents can access the video guides, the class calendar, so that's not a problem. But to access the class notes, the video podcasts, these other additional resources that are extremely invaluable for child's learning, you need your child's username and password to get in. So once they're in, you're going to see that here they can also access the class calendar, so there's no excuses about what upcoming due dates there are. Course outline information is here. And the formula sheet, again, is extremely important. And the main reason is because there's so many formulas that are occurring here. So I put all the Physics 11 formulas on the front side and then all the Physics 12 formulas on the back side. So this may be something that students may want to carry over to university even, because I've had students in the past who have actually come back to me and asked me, can I grab the old formula sheet from my class for their use for university? So that's something that I've been working on over the last few years. On the course website as well is the ebook. So a few mentions around that is that the textbook is about 2 kilograms. It's a pretty heavy book, very thick one. So one of the things I recommend to people is that instead of carrying that textbook everywhere, they could actually ask me to sign one out. So that way they could use at home if that is something that they would like to have, or they could utilize their Chromebooks to access the ebook, and the ebook is already available for students to use, and this can be accessed at home as well. So we really infrequently use a textbook, but again, if students require those resources, then that is there for them. Now, the big thing is in my class is the anchor that makes sure that everyone is successful or has the greatest chance of success is by printing off the class notes. Now, I remember back in the day when I was in high school and I had to copy down notes line by line, and my hands would hurt horribly. So one of the things that I found that was beneficial for students over the last few years is by having these class notes printed off, so they could go to the school library, or this is something that they should do at home. As an example, I'll explain why. So, for instance, if we look at lesson number 10 as an example, something later on, you'll see that there's a lot of notes and a lot of equations. And there is much better time spent instead of spending, 45 minutes copying down notes every day, which is painful. This is already printed off. I explained the general gist of it. There's going to be additional notes that need to be written down, obviously, on here. And then when it comes down to doing the examples, instead of trying to copy down word for word and then writing down the solutions, students are actively engaged in trying to solve these out. And that builds the confidence necessary to build towards their testing, towards long-term growth, and that sort of thing. So I would highly recommend that students print these off. And I've also seen through my own reflection of my students is that students who actively utilize Google Classroom tends to be far more successful than the students that do not utilize it. So that is something that I highly encourage for maximizing success. Now, I found that a lot of times when I'm doing practice problems, I remember back in the day that I would not be able to know whether I'm doing it correctly or not. Or if I'm stuck at a step, well, how do I solve it without the teacher's support? So every class practice problem I do, and these were updated, I believe, as of 2020, I put down the solutions to each problem. Certain problems that require more steps, I put in the intermediary steps in between, so that way students can have access to these, and they will be able to know whether they're doing the work properly or not. I would definitely say about 85% of my test questions or quiz or probe questions, they come from the practice problems and the examples in class. So this is a really incredible resource, an important resource for students to access to maximize success. So you can see that as we get into something a little bit more challenging towards the end of Unit 1, you can see that these problems, these word problems here, they are done in multiple steps. So you can see that it's done step by step for students, for them to access. So that's something valuable to help. One of the things that I've introduced new as of last year is the video podcast. Now, the video podcast is not a substitute for skipping class. That's something that I strongly say to my students at the first day of classes, is because the video podcast only covers really about 60 to 70% of the materials that we do in class. I found that these video podcasts were additional resource for students who seem to want to review before they come to class. As an example, in the video podcast listing here, you can see that this podcast number 1 corresponds to lesson number 1 to lesson number 3 of the class notes. So if your child's a student who wants to review the materials before coming to class, this might be a really good resource for you. Now, I remember when I used to tutor students back in the past that, and these are not students of mine, but students that I tutored in the community, that tutoring is expensive. So before you utilize a resource like a tutor, for instance, this may be an additional support mechanism for your child. So what they can do is they can watch the video podcast following the class if they wish, and it kind of solidifies some of the gaps in class. So this year, I spent a lot of time in, and I recorded for this, so that way you have access to this. Now, at this current time, this is at the beginning of the school year, September 4th, and so I only uploaded Unit 1, but as the course progresses, Unit 2, Unit 3, and Unit 4 will follow up the exact same way. The best thing is communications is extremely important between parents, guardians, students especially as well. So whenever there's an issue, please reach out. The best way to reach out to me is by email, either by my email address up here, mngo@hrce.ca, or use the form that I provided here. This is mainly because of the limited prep time I do have available for this coming school year. So this is the easiest way to reach out to me. Anyways, I hope this video served you well and kind of give you a glimpse of some of the resources that I'm trying to help bridge the gap between parents, guardians, and students and myself. That way we could have a successful school year. And really, I will have to say, though, that based on my experiences teaching at Citadel High, based on these resources, the students that end up with grades over 85 are the ones that are actually parents, guardians, myself. We all work together to make sure that we have the grade success. And I encourage this wonderful opportunity for students to build on that community work that we all want. Anyways, wishing everyone all the best, and please take care. Bye-bye.